On June 8th, 2030, the World Cup will kick off in 3 continents at once. Spain, Portugal, and Morocco will host the main tournament. But before that, 3 ceremonial opening matches will be played in Uruguay, Argentina, and Paraguay to mark 100 years since the very first World Cup. 6 countries, 3 continents, 54 teams, 20-plus stadiums, hundreds of thousands of fans crisscrossing the globe, and a logistical nightmare that no organization in sports history has ever attempted. FIFA calls it the Centenary World Cup. Critics call it something else. They call it the biggest gamble the sport has ever taken. Because if this tournament goes wrong, it will not just be embarrassing. It could permanently damage the credibility of football's governing body. And there is real evidence that FIFA may have finally bitten off more than they can chew. To understand why 2030 is unprecedented, you have to understand what came before it. Every previous World Cup was hosted by a single nation: Brazil in 2014, Russia in 2018, Qatar in 2022. The only exception was the 2002 tournament, jointly hosted by South Korea and Japan. That format was already considered complex. Coaches complained about travel, broadcasters struggled with logistics, and that was 2 countries on the same continent. 2030 will involve 6 countries, 3 continents, and a time zone spread of over 10 hours. What FIFA is attempting has no precedent in the history of the sport. It is the equivalent of trying to run the Olympics simultaneously in Paris, Los Angeles, and Sydney. Nobody has ever done this. Nobody knows for sure if it can be done. Let's start with the logistical challenges. The 3 opening ceremonial matches in South America will be played on a Thursday. The main tournament in Europe and Morocco begins the following Sunday. That means South American teams playing their opening ceremony match must fly across the Atlantic, adjust to new time zones, and be ready to compete in their real tournament fixture within 72 hours. Sports scientists have already warned that this creates unfair conditions. Jet lag reduces performance by an estimated 8 to 12% for elite athletes. That is the difference between winning and losing a knockout match. Teams from South America will effectively be handicapped from the first day. And that is just the beginning. Fan travel is another nightmare. A supporter who wants to follow their team through the group stage may need to fly between Morocco and Portugal multiple times at costs that could reach thousands of dollars per trip. FIFA has offered no subsidies, no coordinated travel packages. The financial burden falls entirely on the ordinary fan.
Now let's talk about the environmental cost. The 2022 Qatar World Cup was already criticized for its carbon footprint. Fans and teams were flying into a single small country, which limited emissions. 2030 will do the opposite. Estimated air travel for teams and staff alone will exceed 1 billion passenger kilometers. That is more than double any previous tournament in history. Environmental groups have calculated that the 2030 World Cup could generate over 9 million tons of carbon dioxide from travel alone. That is equivalent to the annual emissions of a country like Nicaragua. FIFA has pledged to offset these emissions through carbon credit programs, but investigative journalists have shown that similar pledges made for Qatar were largely unfulfilled. In a decade where the world is trying to reduce aviation emissions, FIFA is designing a tournament that maximizes them. Climate scientists have called it a public relations disaster in slow motion.
The financial risks are even greater. Morocco is not a wealthy nation. Its economy is smaller than that of the state of Georgia in the United States. Hosting a World Cup requires enormous infrastructure investment. New stadiums, airport expansions, highways, hotels, training grounds. Morocco has committed to spending over $5 billion on tournament infrastructure. Independent analysts estimate the true cost will exceed $12 billion once overruns are factored in. To put that in context, $12 billion is equivalent to roughly 10% of the Moroccan government's annual budget. If the tournament does not generate the expected tourism revenue, Morocco could face a debt burden that takes decades to repay. Argentina, one of the ceremonial opening hosts, is in the middle of its worst economic crisis in over 20 years. Uruguay and Paraguay are small nations without the resources to bear even minor costs. Every host nation is stretching itself financially to make this tournament happen. and FIFA itself will pocket the vast majority of the resulting revenue.
Then there is the political risk. Spain and Morocco have a long and complicated history. The two countries share a maritime border, and disputes over the Spanish enclaves of Ceuta and Melilla have caused diplomatic tensions for decades. In 2021, Morocco temporarily withdrew its ambassador from Madrid. In 2022, thousands of migrants were pushed toward the Spanish border in what Spain called a coordinated pressure campaign. These are not distant historical grievances. They are active disputes that could easily flare up during a 2-month tournament that requires close cooperation between the two nations. Portugal and Spain have their own frictions over water rights and Iberian energy policy, and the choice to include Morocco in the primary hosting group has upset several other African nations who felt they were more deserving candidates. Behind every diplomatic handshake at the World Cup announcement, there were unresolved political tensions that could disrupt logistics at any moment.
So why did FIFA choose this format at all? The official answer is symbolism. The first World Cup was held in Uruguay in 1930. The 2030 tournament falls on the 100th anniversary. FIFA argues that including the original South American hosts honors the history of the sport. But cynics point to something else. FIFA president Gianni Infantino has been under pressure to expand the tournament in ways that generate more revenue. The move from 32 teams to 48 teams starting in 2026 adds 104 matches to the tournament. More matches means more broadcast rights, more sponsorship inventory, more ticket sales. The 6-nation, 3-continent format allows FIFA to sell hosting rights, broadcast rights, and sponsorship packages across multiple markets simultaneously. In pure commercial terms, 2030 could generate over $11 billion in revenue for FIFA, more than any tournament in history. The symbolism of honoring Uruguay is real, but the real driver is money. And when the money is this large, corners tend to get cut.
Here is what could go wrong. And these are not far-fetched scenarios. These are the risks that FIFA officials themselves have privately discussed. Scenario 1. A security incident in one of the 6 host nations forces a stadium evacuation or match cancellation. FIFA has no contingency plan for relocating a match to a different continent on short notice. Scenario 2. An airline strike or major air traffic disruption during the group stage strands thousands of fans and teams in the wrong country. Scenario 3. Political tensions between Spain and Morocco flare up, resulting in border closures during the tournament. Scenario 4. An outbreak of a communicable disease in one host nation forces travel restrictions across multiple continents. Scenario 5. A major infrastructure failure in Morocco damages the reputation of the tournament and creates negative headlines during peak broadcast windows. Any one of these scenarios could turn 2030 from a celebration into a catastrophe. FIFA has assured the public that contingency plans exist, but no organization has ever had to plan contingencies at this scale. And yet, the tournament will happen. Contracts have been signed, broadcast rights have been sold, stadium construction is already underway across 3 continents. Whether the 2030 World Cup becomes the greatest celebration in football history or the largest institutional failure the sport has ever seen depends on factors largely outside anyone's control. If everything goes right, it will be remembered as the tournament that unified 3 continents around the beautiful game. If any of the risk scenarios materialize, it will be remembered as the moment FIFA finally overreached. Football fans, host cities, and everyday supporters are essentially unwilling participants in the biggest experiment the sport has ever conducted. The only certainty is that the world will be watching in 2030, and what it sees, for better or worse, will define football for the next generation. FIFA has bet the future of its most important product on a format nobody has ever tried. The next few years will reveal whether that bet was inspired or reckless.